Chapter 1, Christmas Plans. Amanda Richards loved Christmas. Not in the obsessive, start decorating in October sort of way. She simply loved what Christmas represented. Family gathered together. Kids tearing into wrapping paper. Good food. Laughter. Everybody making an effort to be happy at the same time. At 26, she felt like she was finally creating the kind of Christmas she'd always imagined. Her husband Jacob was in the living room pretending to watch television while actually keeping an eye on their 19-month-old son, Brandon. The toddler was repeatedly stuffing toy blocks into a plastic dump truck and announcing each successful delivery with a triumphant squeal. Amanda smiled from the kitchen. Life was busy and exhausting and occasionally ridiculous. But it was good. Brandon let out another war cry. Jacob sighed dramatically. "Buddy, if that's another emergency shipment of blocks, we're going to have to discuss your transportation budget." Brandon ignored him completely. Amanda laughed. "Looks like management isn't accepting feedback." "No kidding." Jacob stood and stretched. "He's got your listening skills." She pointed a spatula toward him. "Careful. I speak only the truth." "That sounds like something a man says right before sleeping on the couch." "It would be worth it if I got the last word." "You're adorable." Jacob groaned. "I hate when you weaponize affection." Amanda grinned and turned back to dinner. The holidays were only a couple of weeks away, and most of her attention had been focused on making Christmas special for everyone, especially her mother. The last few years had been difficult. Her parents' divorce had surprised almost everyone, including Amanda. One day they had been married. Then her mother had explained that they had simply grown apart. She hadn't sounded angry. She hadn't described betrayal or screaming matches or anything dramatic. Just two people who wanted different things. Amanda had understood that. Life was short. People deserved happiness. Her mother certainly seemed happier now. Earlier that year, she'd remarried a man named Richard. Amanda genuinely liked him. He treated her mother well. He was thoughtful, respectful, and made her laugh. That was really all Amanda wanted for her. Her phone vibrated on the counter. A text message from her mother. Amanda glanced at it. "Richard is worried about Christmas." She frowned. Another text arrived immediately afterward. "He doesn't want to feel like he's intruding." Amanda considered that. She could understand why. This would be Richard's first Christmas as part of the family. Everything would be new, unfamiliar, awkward. The third message appeared. "I told him nobody feels that way, but he's nervous." Amanda set the phone down. The solution seemed fairly obvious. Christmas wasn't about dates. It was about people. If shifting things around helped someone feel welcome, why not do it? Jacob noticed her expression. "What happened?" "Mom's texting." "Good or bad?" "Not bad." She dried her hands with a dish towel. "Richard's worried about Christmas." Jacob shrugged. "First holiday after a marriage. Makes sense." "Exactly." She leaned against the counter. "He doesn't want to feel awkward." "What are you thinking?" Amanda smiled. "I can solve that." Jacob immediately looked suspicious. Whenever Amanda announced she could solve something, it usually meant she had already formed a plan. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I'm calling Dad." Jacob nodded. "Reasonable enough." Amanda picked up her phone and found her father's number. The call connected after a few rings. "Hey, sweetheart." The familiar greeting brought an automatic smile to her face. "Hi, Dad. How's my grandson?" Amanda looked toward the living room where Brandon was now attempting to wear the dump truck like a hat. "Creative." Her father laughed. "I'll take that as good. Mostly. Then he's right on schedule." Amanda smiled. Her father always sounded the same. Steady. Reliable. Like the answer to a question nobody had asked yet. It had been that way her entire life. When she got sick as a kid. When she left for college. When she got married. When Brandon was born. No matter what happened, her father always seemed okay. Strong. Solid. Like a person life simply couldn't knock over. "What's up?" he asked. "I wanted to talk about Christmas." There was a brief pause. Then his tone brightened. "Oh, sure. We've been figuring out plans." "Okay." Amanda leaned against the counter. Mom's worried Richard might feel awkward. The pause this time lasted slightly longer. "How so?" "Because it's his first Christmas with the family." "Ah. He doesn't want to feel like an outsider." Her father was quiet. Amanda mistook it for consideration. "I had an idea." "Let's hear it." "What if we celebrated with you another day?" Silence. Not complete silence. She could hear him breathing. Could almost imagine him sitting in his apartment listening. Amanda continued. "Just this year. Still nothing." She laughed lightly. "It'll make things easier for everybody." A few seconds passed. Then her father finally spoke. "Everybody?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "You said it'll make things easier for everybody." "Oh." Amanda smiled. "I just mean nobody has to feel uncomfortable." Another pause. Longer than before. Then, "So Richard can have Christmas Day." The way he said it felt odd somehow. Flat. Careful. Amanda couldn't quite place why. "Well, yeah." She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "It's not a big deal." More silence. She suddenly became aware that Jacob was watching from the other room. "Dad, I'm here. You okay?" "Sure." His voice sounded perfectly normal. Maybe she'd imagined the hesitation. Then he asked, "What day were you thinking instead?" "I don't know yet. We'll figure something out." "Of course." Amanda relaxed. "See? No problem." He understood. The whole thing was reasonable. "I knew you'd be cool about it." A short laugh came through the phone, but something about it sounded strange. Not amused. Tired, maybe. "I've always been cool about things." Amanda smiled. "That's true." Another silence followed. For reasons she couldn't explain, it suddenly felt uncomfortable. She hurried to fill it. "We'll definitely get together. Just a different day. Right? And Brandon still has presents for Grandpa." "I'm sure he does." The conversation felt oddly out of rhythm now. Not hostile. Just off. Amanda couldn't identify why. Her father cleared his throat. "Well, yeah. I should let you get back to your evening." "Okay." She hesitated. Then added, "Love you, Dad." A few seconds passed before he answered. "Love you too, Amanda." The call ended. Amanda lowered the phone. Jacob immediately asked, "How'd it go?" "Fine." He raised an eyebrow. "Just fine." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "You look weird." "I do not." "Amanda." She thought about the call. There had been some pauses, a little hesitation, but nothing serious, certainly nothing worth worrying about. "He was fine," she said confidently. Jacob studied her for a moment before nodding. "If you say so." "I do." She put the phone away and returned to making dinner. Within minutes she was thinking about gift shopping, holiday recipes, and whether Brandon would try eating wrapping paper again this year. The conversation drifted from her mind. Across town, her father sat alone in his apartment. His phone rested on the arm of his recliner. The television was on. He wasn't watching it. For nearly 5 minutes he didn't move. The room was completely silent except for the murmur of voices coming from the screen. Finally he stood, walked to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, then closed it again because he wasn't actually hungry. He stared out the window into the darkness. Christmas Day. Not a different schedule. Not a compromise. Not an invitation with adjustments. Christmas Day belonged to somebody else now. The realization settled over him with surprising clarity. Not sharp. Not explosive. Just final. He thought about his daughter saying it wasn't a big deal. Thought about how easily she'd offered his place to another man. A man she had known for only a few years. A man she wanted comfortable in a role that had once belonged to somebody else. His chest felt hollow. He wasn't angry. Anger required energy. He was simply tired. Very tired. Slowly he walked back to his chair. Sat down. Looked at the phone. For most of his life, every major decision he made involved taking care of someone else. His wife. His daughter. His family. Tonight, perhaps for the first time, he found himself wondering what life would look like if he simply stopped. The thought lingered long after the television finished playing. Long after the apartment went quiet. And as Christmas lights glowed throughout the city, a man who had spent his entire adult life putting other people first sat alone and began considering a future that contained none of them. Chapter 2: The Package. Amanda didn't think much about the conversation for the next few days. December had a way of consuming every available minute. There were gifts to buy, groceries to haul, cookies to bake, holiday events to attend, and a toddler determined to investigate every ornament within reach. By Christmas Eve, her attention was completely focused on surviving the festivities. By Christmas Day, she was exhausted. The day itself went well. Her mother was happy. Richard was grateful and noticeably relieved. Brandon accumulated enough toys to open his own retail store. Everyone laughed, ate too much, and took pictures. The kind of Christmas Amanda had wanted. The kind she would have called a success. At one point her mother settled into a chair with a cup of coffee and sighed happily. "This has been wonderful." Amanda smiled. "I'm glad. You did a great job." The compliment warmed her. She had worked hard to make everything come together. Across the room, Richard was kneeling beside Brandon, helping him assemble a toy train set. The two appeared completely absorbed in the task. Her mother followed Amanda's gaze. "He's good with kids." "He is." Amanda genuinely meant it. Richard was a good man. Watching him with Brandon made her happy. The entire day passed without Amanda giving much thought to her father. Not because she disliked him. Not because she was intentionally excluding him. The thought simply never occurred to her. She assumed there would be another gathering later. Another dinner. Another visit. There always was. Life moved forward. That was just how families worked. The following morning, Amanda finally picked up her phone. She was folding laundry while Brandon wandered through the living room carrying the cardboard box from one of his gifts. Jacob was cleaning up wrapping paper casualties. Amanda opened her contacts. She smiled. Christmas was over. Everything had settled down. Now she could invite him over. The phone rang. Once, twice, then immediately switched to voicemail. Amanda frowned. That was unusual. Her father usually answered. If he didn't answer, he normally called back. She left a message. Hey Dad, sorry I didn't call yesterday. Things got kind of crazy. Give me a call when you get a chance. She hung up. An hour later she sent a text. No response. By that evening she sent another. Still nothing. The next morning the messages showed undelivered. Amanda stared at the screen. What? Jacob glanced over. What happened? My texts aren't going through. Maybe his phone broke. Maybe. The explanation seemed reasonable. Yet something felt wrong. Later that afternoon she called again. Voicemail. Immediately. No ringing. No connection. Just voicemail. Amanda's stomach tightened slightly. That's weird. What is? Dad never leaves his phone off. Jacob set down a stack of dishes. When was the last time you talked to him? The week before Christmas. Maybe he's visiting someone. Maybe. But she didn't sound convinced. The rest of the day passed slowly. The uncertainty lingered. By evening she had called 3 more times. Nothing. On the third day after Christmas, Amanda finally decided to drive to his apartment. The trip took less than 20 minutes. The entire drive she convinced herself she was being ridiculous. His phone probably broke. Maybe he had gone away for a few days. Maybe he was sick. Maybe. She pulled into the parking lot and immediately knew something was wrong. The balcony outside his apartment was empty. The old folding chair he always sat in during summer evenings was gone. The small table beside it was gone too. Amanda climbed out of the car. Her pulse quickened. No. She hurried toward the building. The apartment manager happened to be walking through the lobby carrying a clipboard. Amanda recognized her immediately. Excuse me. The woman looked up. Oh, you must be Frank's daughter. Amanda froze. Where is he? The manager hesitated. He moved out. Amanda blinked. What? He moved last week. Her entire body went cold. Moved where? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? The woman looked uncomfortable. He turned in his keys and left. Amanda stared at her. He didn't say anything. No. The manager shifted awkwardly. I'm sorry. Amanda felt as though she'd missed part of the conversation. People weren't supposed to just disappear. Not her father. Not without telling her. Not without explaining. She returned to her car in a daze. By the time she reached home, panic had started replacing confusion. Jacob opened the door before she reached it. One look at her face and his expression changed. What happened? He moved. What? His apartment. Her voice shook. He moved out. Jacob stared. When? I don't know. She laughed nervously. The sound didn't resemble laughter. I don't know what's going on. For the first time, genuine fear settled into her chest. That afternoon, a delivery truck arrived. The driver carried a medium-sized box. Certified mail. Amanda signed automatically. Only after closing the door did she notice the return information. Her father's name. Her stomach dropped. Jacob appeared beside her. What is it? Amanda didn't answer. She carried the package to the dining room table. Carefully opened it. Inside was a photo album. A wrapped gift addressed to Brandon. And an envelope. Amanda recognized her father's handwriting immediately. The room suddenly felt too quiet. Jacob sat down beside her. Amanda. She swallowed hard. Then opened the envelope. A folded letter slid into her shaking hands. For several seconds she simply stared at it. Part of her didn't want to read it. Because deep down she already knew. Whatever was written inside explained why his apartment was empty. Why his phone no longer worked. Why he had vanished. Slowly she unfolded the pages. The first line hit her like a punch. Amanda, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. A terrible feeling settled into her stomach. Jacob leaned closer. Neither of them spoke. Amanda continued reading. Each sentence made her feel colder. Her father wasn't missing. He wasn't hurt. He wasn't confused. He had left. Deliberately. Carefully. Permanently. When she reached the section about Christmas, her vision blurred. About being replaced. About being moved aside. About spending years feeling increasingly unimportant. The words felt impossible. This couldn't be her father. Her father didn't think those things. Her father was always okay. Always strong. Always there. Yet the handwriting belonged to him. The words belonged to him. And perhaps worst of all, she couldn't remember the last time she'd asked whether he was actually okay. A tear landed on the page. Amanda barely noticed. Then she reached the final lines. I loved being your father. I wish things had been different. But I don't have anything left to give. Goodbye, Amanda. The letter slipped from her fingers. For a long moment nobody spoke. Jacob looked at the pages. Then at his wife. Amanda stared at the table. At the wrapped gift for Brandon. At the photo album. At the evidence of a man who had spent days preparing a goodbye she never saw coming. He's not coming back, she whispered. The realization hit her all at once. Not a fight. Not an argument. Not punishment. Not a lesson. Her father hadn't left to make a point. He had left because he genuinely believed he no longer mattered. And for the first time in years, Amanda was forced to confront a question she had never thought to ask. What if he had been feeling that way for a very long time? Chapter 3 The Audit. Amanda didn't sleep much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the last line of the letter. Goodbye, Amanda. Not see you later. Not call me when you're ready. Not even I need time. Goodbye. Permanent. Final. She lay awake beside Jacob long after midnight, staring at the ceiling while replaying every interaction she'd had with her father for the last several years. None of them seemed bad enough to lead here. That was the problem. Nothing had ever seemed bad. No arguments. No screaming matches. No ultimatums. No confrontations. Just distance. Distance she had never noticed because her father never complained about it. By morning, the photo album was sitting on the kitchen table waiting for her. She stared at it while drinking coffee. Jacob sat beside her. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Amanda reached for the cover. The first page opened easily. A picture of a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Her father sat in a hospital chair holding her. His expression looked terrified and impossibly happy. Underneath the picture, written in neat handwriting, Year 1. Amanda swallowed. She turned the page. Birthday pictures, Christmas pictures, trips to the zoo, pumpkin patches, school events, family vacations, father-daughter dances. Every page represented another year. Every page represented memories he had saved. She found herself smiling despite everything. Some pictures she hadn't seen in years. Others she barely remembered. At 6 years old, she sat on her father's shoulders during a parade. At 8, she was missing her 2 front teeth. At 11, she was holding a softball trophy with a grin so large it seemed absurd. He kept all of these? She asked quietly. Jacob looked at the pages. Looks like it. Amanda blinked rapidly. I didn't know. A lump settled in her throat. For her father to assemble this album, he must have gone through boxes and boxes of photographs. Hours of work. Maybe days. Just to send them away. The realization hurt. She continued turning pages. Middle school. High school. Driver's license. Graduation. She paused at a picture of herself standing beside her first car. Her father stood off to the side, watching her, not looking at the camera, looking at her. Amanda noticed something she'd never paid attention to before. In almost every picture, her father wasn't trying to be photographed. He was looking at her, watching her, proud of her. The realization made her chest ache. Then she reached the college section. The difference was immediate. The childhood years had been crowded. Page after page packed with photographs. The college years felt sparse, noticeably sparse. One photograph, then another, then empty space. A lot of empty space. Amanda stared at the pages. 3 pictures. That was all. 4 years of college. 3 photographs. The next page contained her graduation. Then her wedding. Then pictures of Brandon. She frowned. Something about the transition bothered her. The album felt different, as though someone had abruptly stopped recording parts of a story. Jacob had noticed it too. There's a pretty big drop-off. Amanda didn't answer, because she already knew why. The pictures hadn't disappeared. She simply hadn't sent him any. The thought arrived uninvited, and refused to leave. Amanda turned another page, then another. She closed the album. The kitchen felt very quiet. Finally Jacob spoke. How often did you talk to him? Amanda looked away. What? Your dad? She swallowed. I don't know. Jacob waited. Once every few weeks maybe. A call? Usually texting. Jacob nodded slowly. Did he call you? The question made her uncomfortable. Sometimes. How often? Amanda didn't answer immediately, because the truth was becoming hard to ignore. Her father had almost always been the one reaching out, checking in, sending birthday messages, asking about Brandon, asking about work, asking about life. The conversations hadn't stopped because he quit trying. They stopped because she rarely continued them. It wasn't like that, she said. Jacob looked at her carefully. Then what was it like? Amanda felt defensive. He knew I was busy. So was he. The response came gently, without accusation, which somehow made it worse. Amanda stared at the table. You think this is my fault? I think your father didn't write that letter because of one Christmas. She hated how quickly the words landed, because she already knew they were true. Nobody abandoned their daughter over a single holiday. This had been building. For years. The letter wasn't an explosion. It was a collapse. Jacob leaned back in his chair. I don't think you meant to hurt him. I didn't. I know. Amanda rubbed her eyes, then looked back at the album. At 26 years of history, 26 years of effort, 26 years of a father showing up. Suddenly a memory surfaced, one she hadn't thought about in years. A college football game. Her sophomore year. Her father had driven 3 hours to attend. She had been busy with friends afterward and left without seeing him. At the time she'd barely thought about it. Now she imagined him making the drive home. Alone. Another memory followed. Missing his birthday. Forgetting to call until 2 days later. Then another. And another. Small things. Tiny things. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing that seemed important individually. But together they painted a picture she didn't like. The photo album suddenly wasn't a gift. It was evidence, a timeline, an audit, a documented record of a relationship that had slowly withered while she was too busy looking elsewhere to notice. Amanda closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. I didn't know. Jacob reached across the table and took her hand. I believe that. She laughed bitterly. That might actually be worse, because not knowing wasn't innocence. Not when she should have known. Not when she hadn't bothered to look. Across the room, Brandon waddled in carrying a stuffed bear nearly half his size. He immediately tripped over his own feet. Jacob stood. Amanda watched as her husband crossed the room and lifted their son without hesitation, comforting him before the tears could even start. The movement was automatic, instinctive, a parent seeing a need and responding. Nothing special, nothing dramatic, just love. Amanda suddenly wondered how many thousands of moments like that had filled her childhood. How many sacrifices she'd never noticed. How many times her father had put her first while expecting nothing in return. The answer was probably impossible to calculate. Yet somehow she had managed to calculate exactly how much attention her mother needed after the divorce. Exactly how much support her mother deserved. Exactly how important Richard's feelings were during Christmas. And somehow, in all those years, she had never once stopped to calculate how her father was doing. That realization hurt more than the letter. Because the letter was his choice. The years before it were hers. Chapter 4. Looking backward, Amanda spent the next week searching for a mistake. There had to be one. Some missing detail. Some misunderstanding. Some explanation that would make everything hurt less. Instead, every answer she found made it worse. Her father had closed his bank account. His apartment lease had been terminated. His phone number had been disconnected. His social media accounts were gone. It was as if he had methodically erased every trail leading back to himself. And every day that passed made one thing increasingly difficult to deny. He hadn't acted impulsively. He had planned this. That realization frightened her more than his letter. Anger was impulsive. People calmed down. People regretted angry decisions. But planning meant he'd spent days thinking about it. Maybe weeks. Maybe longer. Amanda sat at her dining room table and reread the letter again. Then again. She was looking for clues. Hidden meanings. Something she had missed. Instead, she kept finding the same thing. No demands. No conditions. No threats. No instructions. Just exhaustion. It read less like an angry father and more like a man putting down a weight he could no longer carry. The thought made her stomach twist. You've read that thing 6 times today. Jacob set a cup of coffee in front of her. 8. He winced. That's not healthier. I know. Amanda folded the letter. I just keep thinking maybe I missed something. Maybe there isn't anything to miss. She didn't like that answer. Because it implied the letter meant exactly what it said. Her father was done. Absolutely done. The doorbell rang. Amanda looked up. Her mother had texted earlier asking if she could stop by. Amanda suddenly wasn't sure she wanted company. Not for this conversation. Not today. Unfortunately, fate disagreed. A few moments later, her mother entered carrying a casserole dish and a cheerful smile. The smile disappeared immediately when she saw Amanda's face. Oh, honey. Amanda looked down. The guilt hit instantly. Not because her mother had done anything wrong. Because for the first time in years, she couldn't look at either parent without thinking about the other. Her mother sat across from her. Any word? Amanda shook her head. No. I'm sure he'll come around. The statement came reflexively. Confident. Certain. For reasons Amanda couldn't explain, it bothered her. Why? Her mother blinked. What? You said he'll come around. Of course. Amanda studied her. What makes you think that? Her mother seemed confused. He's your father. The answer sounded perfectly reasonable. Once. Now it didn't. Amanda unfolded the letter. He says not to contact him. Her mother sighed. He's hurt. Hurt people come back? Eventually. Jacob quietly collected Brandon from the living room and disappeared toward the den, giving them space. Amanda watched him go, then looked back at her mother. When's the last time you talked to him? The question clearly surprised her. What does that matter? Just answer. Her mother shifted uncomfortably. I don't know. Amanda waited. A while. A while meaning what? Her mother frowned. Months. Months. Amanda absorbed that. Months. The woman who had once spent 23 years married to him hadn't spoken to him in months. The realization felt strange. Almost unreal. Not because they were divorced. Because she'd never thought about it before. Not once. She had accepted the divorce as a thing that happened. A chapter ending. A new beginning. She'd never stopped to wonder what happened to the person left standing in the ruins. The person who hadn't asked for the change. Her mother must have seen something in her expression. Because she leaned forward. Amanda. What? You can't blame yourself for their divorce. I'm not. Then what's going on? Amanda stared at the photo album. At the pages she'd practically memorized by now. I'm starting to think I don't know what happened. Her mother's expression hardened slightly. What do you mean? Amanda hesitated. Then asked the question. The one she should have asked years ago. How bad was it for him? The room became quiet. Her mother's eyes shifted away. Tiny movement. Almost nothing. Yet Amanda noticed. For the first time, she noticed. It was hard on everyone. That's not what I asked. Her mother sighed. Amanda, how bad was it? Several seconds passed. Then her mother rubbed her forehead. He took it hard. The answer felt incomplete. Painfully incomplete. Amanda suddenly remembered something. An uncle mentioning lawyers. Arguments over finances. A conversation she'd ignored because she hadn't wanted details. At the time, she'd assumed the adults would sort everything out. Now she wondered what she'd missed. That evening she called her Aunt Lisa, her father's younger sister. The conversation changed everything. Oh, sweetheart. Those were the first words out of her aunt's mouth. Not anger. Not judgment. Just sadness. Amanda listened for nearly 2 hours. She learned things nobody had ever told her. Things she had never bothered asking. The house. The retirement accounts. The debt. The years afterward. The second jobs he'd picked up temporarily to stabilize things. The apartment. The lonely holidays. The fact that he never talked badly about anyone. Not his ex-wife. Not Amanda. Not anybody. He just quit talking about himself. Amanda sat frozen. What? After the divorce. Her aunt's voice softened. Whenever I asked how he was doing, he'd change the subject. Amanda swallowed. Why didn't anyone tell me? A long pause followed. Then her aunt answered honestly. We thought you knew. The words hit like a truck. Because they made perfect sense. Everyone had assumed she knew. Everyone had assumed a daughter would notice. That a daughter would ask questions. That a daughter would check on her father. The truth was infinitely worse. She could have known. She just hadn't looked. That night Amanda sat alone after Brandon had gone to sleep. The house was quiet. Jacob was reading in the bedroom. The photo album rested open in front of her. She flipped through it again. Slowly. One page at a time. This time she wasn't looking at herself. She was looking at him. A young father carrying a toddler. A father teaching a little girl to ride a bicycle. A father standing at softball games. School events. Graduations. Birthdays. Thousands of moments. Thousands of choices. Thousands of times he had shown up. And somehow the older she became, the less she seemed to notice him standing there. Amanda stopped at one of the final pages. Picture from her wedding. Her father was smiling. Proud. Happy. Looking directly at her. She stared at that picture for several minutes. Then another realization arrived. One that somehow hurt more than all the others. Her father hadn't changed after the divorce. Not really. She had. And she'd been changing long before she noticed. Long before Christmas. Long before Richard. Long before the letter. The Christmas conversation merely revealed something that had already been true for years. She hadn't pushed him out of her life in a single moment. She had done it slowly enough that neither of them fully saw it happening until there was nothing left to save. And somewhere, hundreds or thousands of miles away, the man who had once centered his entire life around her was beginning a new one that no longer included her at all. Chapter 5 Dead Ends. By the middle of January, Amanda had exhausted every lead she could think of. None of them worked. Her father was gone. Not missing. Not hiding badly. Gone. The distinction mattered. Missing implied he wanted to be found. Her father clearly did not. Amanda sat at her kitchen table staring at a notebook full of names, phone numbers, and dead ends. Former neighbors. Old friends. Relatives. Co-workers she barely remembered meeting. Every conversation ended the same way. No one knew where he was. Or if they knew, they weren't telling her. The realization stung. Not because she blamed them. Because she understood why. The letter had made one thing painfully clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a temporary separation. It wasn't a dramatic gesture intended to force an apology. Her father had left intentionally. People who loved him were apparently respecting that choice. Amanda pressed her palms against her eyes. She was tired. For weeks she'd lived with a knot of anxiety in her stomach. Every morning she woke hoping for a message. Every evening she went to bed disappointed. Nothing came. No texts. No emails. No phone calls. Nothing. Jacob walked into the kitchen carrying Brandon. Their son immediately reached toward Amanda. Mama. She forced a smile. Hey, buddy. Brandon settled into her lap, instantly stealing the pencil she'd been holding. Amanda didn't stop him. The toddler proudly scribbled nonsense across one corner of her notebook. Jacob glanced at the page. I see the investigation continues. Amanda sighed. I don't know what else to do. Jacob sat down across from her. You could stop. She looked up sharply. What? You heard me. Her expression hardened. You're telling me to stop looking for my father? No. Jacob folded his arms. I'm telling you to stop expecting a different answer. Amanda hated that response immediately, because it sounded dangerously close to the truth. He can't just disappear. He did. He can't just end 26 years. Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then he asked a question she wasn't prepared for. Do you think that's what he believes happened? Amanda frowned. What does that mean? It means maybe from his perspective the relationship ended a long time ago. The words landed harder than she expected. Amanda looked away, because she had already started wondering the same thing. The photo album had changed everything. Once she'd started paying attention, she couldn't stop noticing things. Things she'd ignored. Things she'd excused. Things she'd never even questioned. Jacob continued gently. When was the last time you invited him over before Christmas? Amanda didn't answer. When was the last time you called just to talk? Still nothing. When was the last time you… I get it. Her voice came out sharper than intended. Jacob nodded. Do you? The kitchen fell silent. Immediately Amanda regretted snapping at him. Not because he looked hurt, because he looked sad. And she knew he wasn't trying to attack her. He was trying to force her to face something she'd spent weeks avoiding. Amanda stared at the table. I keep thinking if I can just explain. Explain what? She opened her mouth, then stopped, because she wasn't sure. The Christmas invitation? She hadn't meant to hurt him. The years before that, she hadn't meant those either. Intentions suddenly felt worthless. A person could accidentally neglect someone for a very long time. The neglect still existed. Jacob leaned forward. You know what keeps bothering me? Amanda looked up. What? That letter. Her stomach tightened. What about it? He wasn't angry. Amanda blinked. The observation surprised her. Jacob continued. If he'd been furious, I'd think maybe he'd calm down eventually. The words hung between them. But he wasn't. Amanda looked down. No, her father hadn't sounded angry. That was what made the letter so frightening. Angry people wanted something. Recognition. Punishment. Apologies. Justice. Something. The letter wanted nothing. It simply ended. Like a man walking away from a house after deciding it no longer belonged to him. Amanda felt tears threatening again. I'm a terrible daughter. Jacob immediately shook his head. No. I abandoned him. You neglected him. She stared. The correction surprised her. Jacob continued carefully. Those aren't the same thing. How? Because abandonment sounds deliberate. Amanda looked away. And neglect doesn't? No. His voice remained calm. Neglect can happen because people stop paying attention. Amanda hated how accurate that sounded. Because she had stopped paying attention. Not on purpose. Not maliciously. But she had. Somewhere along the way she'd assumed her father would always be fine. Always be available. Always be there. Like gravity. Like sunrise. Like something permanent that required no maintenance. A horrible realization surfaced. She had worried more about Richard feeling awkward during one Christmas than she'd worried about her father's happiness in years. The comparison made her sick. That evening Amanda found herself sitting beside Brandon while he played on the living room rug. The toddler was attempting to stack blocks taller than himself. The effort was not going well. Every collapse produced dramatic outrage. Every rebuild produced renewed determination. Amanda smiled despite herself. Then Brandon looked up. Mama. Yeah. He held out a blue block. She took it. His face brightened instantly, as though she'd gifted him the moon. The interaction lasted less than 5 seconds. Yet the affection was absolute. Unquestioning. Complete. Amanda felt her chest tighten. Once upon a time she'd looked at her father exactly like that. The photo album made it impossible to deny. When she was little, he had been her hero. The person who could fix anything. Do anything. Make bad dreams disappear. Then she'd grown older. Life had become larger. More complicated. More crowded. And she'd gradually taken him for granted. Not because she'd stopped loving him. Because she'd stopped noticing. A quiet sob escaped before she could stop it. Brandon immediately crawled into her lap. Concerned. Confused. Trying to help. Amanda hugged him tightly. I'm okay. The lie felt obvious. Brandon patted her cheek. His version of comfort. The gesture nearly broke her completely. Because for the first time she truly understood something her father had written. He'd mentioned regretting missing Brandon growing up. Not because he expected to return. Because he knew exactly what he was losing. All these little moments. The tiny ones. The moments nobody photographs. Nobody celebrates. The moments that become a life. Amanda buried her face in her son's hair. And for the first time since receiving the letter, she stopped looking for a way to fix everything. Because deep down she was beginning to understand the truth. There might not be one. Some damage happened all at once. This wasn't that kind. This damage had taken years. Years of small omissions. Years of failing to notice. Years of assuming there would always be more time. And now there wasn't. For the first time, Amanda accepted that her father may have already given her his final answer. Not because he hated her. Not because he wanted revenge. But because he no longer had enough of himself left to continue trying. That possibility frightened her more than anything else. Chapter 6 The Weight of Silence. February arrived without answers. The holidays ended. The decorations came down. Life resumed. At least on the surface. Amanda still woke each morning hoping there would be a message waiting. An email. A text. Anything. There never was. By now she knew his old phone number by heart. She still tried calling occasionally. The result never changed. Disconnected. Every time. The consistency somehow hurt worse than uncertainty. Because uncertainty left room for hope. The disconnected number left none. One rainy afternoon, Amanda sat on the living room floor while Brandon played beside her. Jacob was still at work. The house was quiet except for cartoons playing softly in the background. Brandon sat cross-legged with a picture book in his lap. Most of his attention wasn't on the story. It was on repeatedly turning pages back and forth because he liked the sound. Amanda watched him. For nearly 10 minutes. Just watched. Something she would have considered boring before becoming a parent. Now she found it strangely fascinating. Everything he did mattered. Every new word. Every small discovery. Every accomplishment. Most of them would never be remembered. The first time he pointed at a dog and correctly identified it. The first time he figured out how to open a snack container by himself. The first time he climbed onto the couch without help. Tiny moments, yet she treasured every one. Without warning, a realization hit her. Her father had experienced all of that too. Not just the major milestones. Everything. The countless little moments nobody else noticed. The ones that never made photo albums. The ones that never appeared in family stories. The ordinary days. Amanda looked toward the bookshelf. The photo album sat there now. She had moved it from the kitchen because seeing it constantly had become overwhelming. She still opened it almost every day. She wasn't even sure why anymore. Punishment, maybe. Or remembrance. Perhaps both. Brandon suddenly stood up and walked toward her. One of his favorite picture books clutched in his hands. He held it out. "Mama." Amanda smiled. "You want me to read?" A vigorous nod. She accepted the book. Brandon immediately climbed into her lap, trusting completely that she would stop whatever she was doing and focus entirely on him. Amanda felt something twist in her chest, because she did stop. Immediately, without hesitation. There were dishes in the sink, laundry upstairs, messages she needed to answer. None of that mattered. Her son mattered. The book mattered. This moment mattered. So she read. Halfway through, Brandon lost interest in the story and became fascinated by one particular picture. Amanda kept reading anyway, because parents did ridiculous things. They gave effort without guarantees, energy without rewards, time without recognition, love without conditions. The thought lingered after Brandon wandered off. Later that evening, Jacob arrived home. He found her standing in the kitchen staring out the window. "You okay?" Amanda considered lying, then shook her head. "No." Jacob walked over. "What happened?" She looked up. "I keep thinking about all the things he did." "Your dad?" She nodded. "The little stuff." Jacob waited. Amanda rubbed her forehead. "I never thought about it before. Most kids don't. But I should have." Jacob didn't answer, because there wasn't really a response to that. Amanda laughed bitterly. "When Mom got divorced, I called her constantly." "Yeah. I checked on her." She swallowed. "I worried about her." The next words hurt. "I never checked on him." Jacob's expression softened. Amanda stared at the counter. "Not really." Silence settled between them. After a while, Jacob spoke. "I think that's the part you're struggling with." She looked up. "What do you mean?" "You didn't make one terrible decision." Amanda frowned. "Then what did I do?" Jacob took a moment before answering. "You stopped paying attention to someone who loved you." The words weren't cruel. They were factual, which somehow made them hit harder. Amanda looked away, because she couldn't argue. Not anymore. The evidence was everywhere. The sparse college pages. The unanswered calls she'd forgotten about. The birthdays. The holidays. The years. An entire history of small choices. None catastrophic. All cumulative. And eventually those choices had become a relationship. Or the absence of one. That night, after Brandon was asleep, Amanda sat alone in his room. She often did that now. Just watching him sleep. His tiny chest rising and falling. Safe. Secure. Loved. A parent's perspective had changed so much for her. Before becoming a mother, she'd understood love. At least she thought she had. Now she realized she'd only understood receiving it. Giving it was different. Giving it was sacrifice. It was worry. Constant effort. Constant attention. Constant vulnerability. You spent years building your life around a child. Years prioritizing someone else's happiness over your own. And you did it willingly. Gladly. Because they mattered more than you did. Amanda looked at her sleeping son. Painful thoughts surfaced. What would happen if Brandon grew up and slowly forgot about her? Not hatred. Not anger. Just indifference. The thought felt unbearable. Immediately, she understood something she'd missed in her father's letter. He hadn't written like a man who was furious. He had written like a man who was hurt past exhaustion. Past disappointment. Past hope. A man who had finally accepted reality. Amanda felt tears slipping down her cheeks. She wiped them away. Then she quietly stood and left the room. As she closed the door, she noticed Jacob waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall, watching her, not pushing, not fixing, just there. Amanda stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, she whispered into his shoulder. I don't think he's ever coming back. Jacob closed his eyes. He knew there was no point lying. No point offering false hope. No, he said quietly. I don't think he is. The truth hurt, but not as much as it once had. Because somewhere during the past few weeks, Amanda had stopped wondering how to convince her father to forgive her. Instead, she had started understanding why he wouldn't. And those were two very different things. Chapter 7. Moving forward. Spring arrived whether Amanda was ready for it or not. The world had an irritating habit of continuing. Trees budded. Flowers bloomed. People laughed. Children grew. Days passed. And no matter how many times Amanda checked her email or looked at her phone, her father remained gone. By March, she had stopped searching. Not because she didn't care. Not because she'd given up. Because she finally understood there was a difference. Giving up meant abandoning hope. Accepting reality meant admitting she wasn't in control. Her father had made a choice. For most of her life, she'd never really considered that he had choices. That sounded terrible now. But it was true. He had always been dad. The dependable one. The available one. The person who showed up. The person who adapted. The person who sacrificed. She'd unconsciously assumed he would continue doing those things forever. The realization embarrassed her. One Saturday morning, Amanda sat at the kitchen table while Brandon enthusiastically colored on paper that had originally been white. Most of it was now blue. The little boy was talking to himself as he worked. Entire conversations. None of them understandable. Amanda smiled. Across from her, Jacob sipped coffee. You seem different. Amanda looked up. Different good or different bad? Good. She thought about it. Maybe he was right. The constant panic she'd felt in January was gone. The crushing desperation of February had faded. The grief remained. But grief wasn't panic. It wasn't desperation. It was quieter. He was serious. Jacob knew exactly who she meant. Yeah. Amanda nodded. For a while I kept expecting him to change his mind. What changed? She watched Brandon attack the paper with a green crayon. I finally believed him. The answer hung in the air. Jacob nodded slowly. Neither spoke for a few moments. Then Amanda surprised herself. I think he was telling the truth long before the letter. Jacob raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Amanda leaned back in her chair. I think he was trying to tell me for years. The thought had been growing in her mind lately. Not because she'd discovered new information. Because she'd begun looking at old information differently. The unanswered invitations. The increasingly brief conversations. The way he stopped talking about himself. The fact that she knew almost nothing about his life after the divorce. At the time she'd assumed there wasn't much to know. Now she wondered if she'd simply never asked. The realization still hurt. Probably always would. Brandon suddenly abandoned his drawing and toddled toward her. Amanda immediately lifted him into her lap. The movement was automatic. Unthinking. Natural. Her son rested against her chest. Safe and happy. She wrapped an arm around him. Jacob watched quietly, then smiled. You know what I've noticed lately? What? You're paying attention differently. Amanda frowned. What does that mean? You put your phone down more. She hadn't realized she'd been doing that. You ask people how they're doing and actually wait for an answer. Amanda blinked. I do. Yeah. Jacob smiled sadly. You didn't used to. The observation startled her. Not because she thought he was wrong. Because she thought he was right. A few months ago she would have felt defensive. Now she simply felt thoughtful. That evening her mother called. Amanda nearly let the phone go to voicemail. Their relationship had become strained. Not because they'd fought. Because some conversations were impossible to avoid forever. Eventually Amanda answered. Hi, Mom. Hi, honey. A pause. Then, can I come by tomorrow? Amanda already knew what the conversation would be about. Okay. The next afternoon her mother arrived carrying a pie neither of them particularly wanted. Amanda put on coffee. Both women sat at the kitchen table. The pie remained untouched. After several minutes, her mother finally sighed. You blame me. The statement wasn't angry, just tired. Amanda stared into her coffee. No. Her mother looked relieved. Then Amanda continued. I blame myself. The relief disappeared. The kitchen became very quiet. Her mother folded her hands together. I never wanted this. Amanda believed her. That was part of what made everything so complicated. Nobody had set out to destroy a family. There hadn't been villains. There hadn't been evil intentions. Just people making choices. People thinking about their own pain, their own happiness, their own needs. And somewhere in that process, her father had been left behind. I was happy for you. Her mother nodded slowly. I know. I wanted you to be happy. I know. Amanda looked up. Tears already filled her mother's eyes. The sight immediately softened something inside her. Life wasn't neat. People weren't neat. Even when they hurt each other. My mistake, Amanda said quietly, was never wondering what it cost. Her mother looked away. Neither of them spoke. because there wasn't much left to say. For years Amanda had viewed the divorce through one lens. Her mother's unhappiness, her mother's freedom, her mother's future. Now she could see the other side. Not better, not worse, just equally real. And the truth was uncomfortable. One person's new beginning had been another person's ending. Months earlier she would have stopped there. Now she understood something else. It wasn't her father's responsibility to recover in a way that made everyone else comfortable. The thought surprised her, because for years she'd quietly expected exactly that. Expected him to be okay. Expected him to adapt. Expected him to keep showing up. Expected him to endure. Now he wasn't, and she couldn't honestly say he was wrong. After her mother left, Amanda found herself sitting alone at the table. The house was quiet. Jacob was outside with Brandon. She could hear distant laughter through the open window. Amanda looked around the room, at her home, at her life, at the family she had built. For months she'd been focused on what she'd lost, what she deservedly lost. But another realization had slowly taken root. She still had responsibilities. A husband, a son, people who loved her, people who deserved better than autopilot. The lesson her father left behind wasn't simply about regret. It was about attention, about showing up, about noticing, about valuing people while they were still there. Amanda couldn't change the past. She couldn't repair the relationship. She couldn't undo years of neglect. What she could do was refuse to repeat the same mistake. Outside, Brandon's laughter erupted again. Amanda smiled through tears, then stood. Instead of sitting alone with old guilt, she walked toward the door, toward her family, toward the people still present. And for the first time since Christmas, she felt something that wasn't grief. Not happiness, not yet, but something close to peace. The painful kind that comes when a difficult truth is finally accepted. Chapter 8: The Empty Chair. Christmas came again. Amanda wasn't ready for it. She suspected she never would be. The decorations appeared anyway. The stores filled with music anyway. The lights went up anyway. The world continued doing what it always did, pretending some wounds belonged to last year simply because the calendar changed. Amanda stood in her living room adjusting an ornament on the tree while Brandon, now almost 3, bounced excitedly around the house. "Mama! What? Santa comes tomorrow." Amanda smiled. "That's the rumor." "It true?" The absolute certainty in his voice made her laugh. "Then I guess it must be." Brandon nodded seriously, satisfied the matter had been settled. Then he ran off to spread chaos elsewhere. Jacob appeared carrying a box of decorations. "I think he's getting more excited every year." Amanda accepted an ornament from him. "He definitely gets that from me." "You think?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't start." Jacob grinned. A year ago that exchange would have been followed by another joke, another playful argument. Today it lingered differently, because both of them were thinking about the same thing. The empty place, the absent person, the chair nobody discussed. Not because it was a secret, because it didn't need words anymore. The reality existed whether they spoke of it or not. That evening Amanda sat alone after Brandon went to bed. The house was quiet. The Christmas lights glowed softly in the darkness. The photo album rested in her lap. Its edges were worn now. She had looked through it dozens of times during the past year. Not every day anymore. Not every week. But often enough. The pain had changed. The sharp guilt from the beginning had faded. Not disappeared. Matured. Like a scar. Still present. No longer bleeding. She opened the album. The first pages remained her favorite. The toddler years. The elementary school years. The period when she looked at her father like he was capable of anything. Amanda smiled sadly. Then turned another page. Then another. Eventually she reached the final picture. Her wedding. The last photograph he had included. The last page. The end of the story. Or at least their story. Amanda touched the edge of the picture. A year earlier she would have stared at it looking for evidence she hadn't seen. A clue. A warning. Something. Now she knew there wasn't one. The warning signs had existed. She simply hadn't understood them. A soft creak sounded behind her. Jacob. He sat beside her on the couch. Neither spoke immediately. Finally he glanced at the album. "Wedding page again?" "Yeah. You always stop there." Amanda nodded. "I know." Jacob leaned back. "Why?" She thought about it, then shrugged slightly. "Because that's where I still expected things to go on forever." The answer surprised both of them. Amanda continued. "I got married. I had Brandon. Life kept moving." She looked down at the picture. "And I never stopped to think his life was moving too." Jacob rested an arm around her shoulders. Neither needed to say anything else. The silence was comfortable. The next morning became a blur of wrapping paper, excitement, toys, laughter, and enough sugar to destabilize a small nation. Brandon tore through presents with remarkable efficiency. Amanda watched him carefully throughout the day, not because she feared missing something, because she understood now that moments only existed once. That evening family gathered for dinner. Her mother came, Richard came, A few relatives came. Everyone laughed. Everyone ate too much. Everyone admired Brandon's newest toys. It looked like a happy Christmas. And in many ways it was. Amanda had spent the past year working to make sure the people she loved knew they mattered. Not through grand gestures, through attention, calls, visits, questions, time, the simple things, the important things. At one point during dinner, Amanda found herself looking across the table. There was an empty chair. Nobody sat there. Nobody planned to sit there. Nobody expected it to change. The chair simply existed. A fact. Like the winter outside. Like the passing years. Like consequences. Her mother followed Amanda's gaze. For just a second. Then looked away. Neither woman spoke. They didn't need to. The chair wasn't an invitation. It wasn't hope. It wasn't waiting. It was remembrance. A reminder that some losses remained losses. That some departures stayed permanent. That some people eventually decided they had given enough. Later that night, after everyone left, Amanda stood alone in the kitchen. The house was finally quiet. Christmas was ending. Another year completed. Another year without her father. She thought about the man she'd spent most of her life taking for granted. The man who had loved her long after she stopped paying attention. The man who had finally become too tired to continue. For a brief moment she wished she could say something to him. Not to change his mind. Not to fix anything. Just to say it. Thank you. I'm sorry. I understand now. But life didn't always provide opportunities for closure. Sometimes understanding arrived after the door had already closed. Amanda turned off the kitchen light. Then headed upstairs. Her husband was waiting. Her son was asleep. Her life continued. Not the life she would have chosen. Not the life she imagined. Simply the life she had. And as she climbed the stairs, Amanda carried forward the lesson her father left behind. Some people seem permanent. They aren't. Some relationships seem indestructible. They aren't. And love, no matter how deep, could not survive forever on effort from only one side. The empty chair downstairs would remain empty. Not because nobody cared. Because caring had arrived too late. And for the first time, Amanda fully accepted that some endings were exactly what they appeared to be. The end. Epilogue somewhere else 3 years later. Amanda was 30. Brandon had started kindergarten. Life looked different now. Not dramatically. Just enough. The kind of changes that accumulated quietly while nobody was paying attention. One evening she stood in her kitchen helping Brandon with homework while Jacob made dinner. Their son sat at the table, tongue sticking out in concentration as he worked through a worksheet. This is stupid. Amanda laughed. Your teacher would probably disagree. It's still stupid. Jacob glanced over. He definitely gets that from you. Amanda pointed a pencil at her husband. I thought we settled that years ago. We settled that you're wrong. Brandon looked between them. I dunno what we're talking about. Neither parent could argue with that. The conversation moved on. Normal, comfortable, ordinary. The kind of family moment Amanda treasured now. Not because it was remarkable. Because it wasn't. That lesson had cost her dearly. She understood now that most of life happened in ordinary moments. Not weddings. Not graduations. Not holidays. The random Tuesday evenings. The shared meals. The small conversations. Those were the things people built lives from. Later that night, after Brandon was asleep, Amanda found herself sorting old photographs. A habit she'd developed over the years. She wanted Brandon to have records of his childhood. Lots of them. Far more than she had ever sent her father. The thought still hurt. Not sharply anymore. Just enough to remind her. She found a picture from the previous summer. Brandon stood beside a fishing pond holding a tiny bluegill. His grin was enormous. Amanda smiled. Then placed the photograph into an album. Every year had its own section. Every year had pages. Every year mattered. She eventually reached the shelf where her father's album remained. She no longer opened it often. Not because she wanted to forget. Because she didn't need to. The lessons lived with her now. The album had done its job. Amanda touched the spine briefly before returning it to its place. Then she turned off the light. Miles away, in another state, a man sat on the porch of a small house watching the sunset. The years had been kind to him. Not perfect. Nothing was perfect. But good. Quiet. Peaceful. His life belonged to him now. For the first time in decades, every decision revolved around what he wanted. Some evenings he traveled. Some weekends he went fishing. Sometimes he sat on his porch and read until darkness settled across the horizon. There were still scars. Some losses never vanished completely. They simply stopped bleeding. Over time, they became part of the landscape. Something you learned to walk around. He thought about his former life less these days. Not because he forced himself not to. Because distance eventually became habit. Habit became routine. Routine became peace. The memories remained. A little girl riding on his shoulders. School concerts. Softball games. Birthday parties. All the good years. Those memories were enough. They always would be. The sun slipped lower. The evening air cooled. He stood and headed inside. Tomorrow would bring another day. Another chapter. Another life. Far away, Amanda tucked her son into bed and kissed his forehead, then sat beside him for a few extra minutes. Not because he needed her there, because she wanted to be there, because some moments only happen once, and because she finally understood how precious those moments truly were. Two lives, two separate futures, neither waiting for the other, neither returning, just moving forward. And sometimes, despite everything, moving forward was its own kind of ending.